Good evening, everyone. Just going to give another 30 seconds or so or a minute for people to trickle in, and then we'll get going. Okay, we'll slowly get the ball rolling here. Thank you so much for joining this evening. My name is Tal Kitron with Appleruth Tutoring. I work as a premium test prep tutor and executive functioning coach. And today we're going to be talking about executive function skills. What are they? And really how to best employ them when as final exam and AP test season are approaching. And for a lot of my students, their AP exam is their final exam. So I just know over the next few weeks, there's a bunch of tests. And my goal today is give you guys some notes, some guidance, some tips and tricks that you might be able to use to feel more prepared, more confident. We're going to leave time for questions at the end. But as you go, if you want to take notes, you want to shoot your questions in the Q&A, I'll definitely make time to answer those. And we will be out of here within 1 hour today. So we're going to start with just what executive function skills are. And this is one of the more dense slides, and we'll break it down into kind of actual physical strategies you guys can use for finals and for APs. But we're looking at this in the frame of EF skills. So executive functions are processes that are necessary for behavior control. So that means managing yourself and your resources, and then things like avoiding procrastination, inhibiting distractions, right? Being organized and planning ahead. So executive function skills are things that we all have in different quantities and on a spectrum, and they can be developed and improved over time, even without coaching, right? We're always developing and improving our executive function skills, especially as young adults. Like if you're a sophomore, junior, senior in high school, this is prime time to develop your EF skills. And again, everyone has these skills, but in our own unique balance. So you can't expect your time management to be the same as the person next to you on testing. And maybe we're really strong at planning ahead, but then when it comes into self-regulating and actually staying on task and persisting through it and completing it, maybe that's an issue. So if someone plans really well and has a good idea of what they do, but then falls short, then maybe they just need to work a little bit with a coach or individually or both on their time management and project persistence and completion skills. Working on these, acknowledging where you're weak, but also where you're strong, will help you prepare for and also succeed on your finals and on APs. So just some food for thought. We need to first define what does success look like for us, and then think about what in the past has worked for me, right? So this is simple, and I think it's an important exercise. People often think about their bad test taking experience. So testing anxiety can come from a bad experience or two. But what's really important is thinking about what tests in the past have gone well. And when it did go well, what were your strategies? And how did they help you? Right. And then based on that, what might you do again, but what might you change? And what might you do differently? And what other strategies would you use? So just being considerate of past experiences, right? And making sure that you put that into play this time around. As you think about that, you'll probably uncover some patterns. So some people think of themselves as, oh, I'm not a good test taker, which could mean a lot of things. It might just mean you're not confident, or maybe you have timing concerns, right? Or just some testing anxiety. Some people also just feel like, yeah, I'm a great test taker. But let's say we just don't consider ourselves amazing test takers. Then you got to think about, well, how am I preparing? Where am I falling short, if at all, there? Is it where I am, right? Do I have a clutter-free workspace? Is it when? Am I doing it when I'm too tired? right? Should I be setting aside more time or more break time, right? And then coming into test day, are you generally really confident you're going to do well and then it doesn't go that way? Or are we feeling anxious and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or are you pretty good at predicting, well, yeah, I'm ready, I'm going to do well? Or some people can predict, well, I'm not ready, so this might not go so great. But making sure that you calibrate whether your expectations are actually meeting reality. And if the old patterns aren't working for you, you got to be willing to shift and create some new ones, right? And we'll talk about some tools you can use today to do that, both studying at home and just in preparing for tests generally. So goal setting, I think, is a very important part of just success in school generally, but also on tests. So we want to establish a goal for each exam, right? So make sure you set targets for your GPA, and then how is this test and how is this class going to help me get there? So here are some examples. So going in, this will help you prioritize which tests and which classes you need to work on and study for more. So let's say we're shooting for an A or a B at least in every class. If I know that AP World is at an 88.4, we need a 92 on the exam to reach an A. So that's going to be a huge priority, right? Because I need to get an A to boost that from a really high B to an A. Environmental science, already 97.5. If I don't bomb the final, I'm going to be fine. So probably low priority, right? Just making sure that I'm not going to do horribly on it. And then algebra 2 is an 84. So, well, that's right in the middle between a B or just kind of a mid B. Hard to get an A from there, but definitely with a bad performance, it could drop to a C, right? Maybe we can get up to a B plus if your school does that. So I'd say middle priority, not as important as AP World, but we'll spend more time than environmental science. And then Spanish, if that's at an 80, well, just those ones on the border, you want to be careful because either we're trying to push it up a letter grade or make sure it doesn't drop down, right? So that would be a big priority. I find that in my test prep coaching, but also mostly in my executive function skills coaching, students are pretty good at prioritizing. And then the follow through is where we often fall short. But let's talk about how we prioritize. It usually doesn't, this goes hand in hand with procrastination, but it usually doesn't hit until it's too late or it feels like it's going to be a big rush. So let's say we've got a bunch of tests and APs coming up in the next 3-4 weeks, like 3 weeks. Going back to that previous slide, maybe there's a test, like the algebra one where you don't need to work as hard on it, right? So you can kind of push that to the back of the list, and maybe you'll start where, on Spanish or on a test where the score is really important. So a lot of prioritization is just taking stock of what's coming up. And then I think organization comes into play, right? So really need to prioritize what's coming first, where do I spend the most time? And then make sure you're allotting break time and time for things to come up, right? Like this is a prime time of year that students get sick, right? So we need to give ourselves a cushion if we can of a couple days. So as we're thinking about our studying plan or plans, every subject should be treated discreetly. So how much time do I need to review my history notes? And then how much time do I need to, rehearse this presentation and so on? Think about how you're studying. So we'll talk about testing, which is not just reading the teacher's notes or reading a friend's notes, but actually like writing down main ideas and then testing yourself on them in the mirror or with a parent or a friend. Think about when you're studying, right? You don't want to be cramming at all, but you do want to make sure that the night before a certain test is dedicated to that subject. As and before you're crafting your study plan, you have to estimate how much time everything will take. This is it might not go perfectly the first time, but it will help you for the next set of tests, even if it's not perfect. So let's say I thought that AP World was going to take me, 2 hours a night for 5 nights, and it ended up being a lot more. Now you know, right? And next time you plan, you've got that in mind, and you can do it a little bit differently. So we prioritize, we plan, and then we start a review. And I think that setting a goal is key for motivation. So making sure that we've got goals, like I said, for each class and just in general for the GPA. And you may even just want to write it down, right? Don't just make this a nebulous kind of wishy-washy goal. Say, all right, I want to get a 95 or above, because if I don't, my grade's going to drop. So my goal is 95 or above. And then you got to find out what's on the test, right? That means I can miss 5 of the 100 questions. If I miss more than that, I won't get my 95, right? So if you're able to see exactly what you need to get to be at your goal score, definitely try to do that. And then that's how you know how well you're progressing and how much time you need to sink into something is, all right, well, I took a mock test and I'm at a 91, so I'm close, but I'm not there, right? If you get a 96, then you know you're really close to your goal. You're already kind of on the right track. It's also really easy to lose motivation this time of year just because there's so much going on. So a lot of my students, I think, are burned out, right? Even without getting sick, we're not getting much sleep, we're tired. And so it can be hard to harness that motivation and find that intrinsic, self-confidence, but it is something to cultivate. Taking breaks is super important. So when you are working, right, let's say you set aside an hour or two to review your Spanish, make sure that you are not just working for 2 hours straight. You'll reach a point of diminishing returns. Almost everyone will. So instead, plan every 30 or 45 minutes, right? There's the 50-10 rule that we'll talk about, but at least every hour at the most, plan for a short break. A short break is anywhere from like 2 to 10 minutes. And what I find a lot of my students is they can start out that way, it's good, but then if they get on their phone, that 10-minute break turns into 15 or 20, and it's kind of an interrupter. So a better break would be, don't allow yourself to go on the internet. Don't allow yourself to go on Discord or Reddit or whatever app is going to suck your time. Instead, just walk around, go get a snack. Looking at pictures of outside is even shown to be helpful, right? Let alone going outside. These small cognitive breaks let our glucose stores replenish. And then when you come back at it, as long as you are able to redirect yourself to what you were working on pretty quickly, you should have a fresh perspective and more energy. I think it's important to schedule these breaks to kind of find out what works for you. Some people need to do like a little bit longer of a work time, and others can't work for more than about 30 minutes without taking a break. Right? So figure out what's working for you. To do that, and a big part of EF coaching is using clocks and watches and timers. Like this is the Pomodoro technique that many of you are probably familiar with. It's just a way of helping you say, all right, I'm going to work for this long, right? 50 minutes, and then I'm going to take 10 minutes of a break. So I know when my break starts, I know when it ends, right? It's just a regiment that then becomes routine. We want to know, when is it time to put something down and move on? Because like I said, you'll reach the point of diminishing returns if you're just reading the same thing over and over and getting tired or bored. So we talked about where you're studying. Over clutter, both digitally and just analog in your house or a room or study area, can be a big distractor. You also want to make what's easy hard and what's hard easy. So what I mean is, it's very easy to get on the phone and go on Instagram and just surf and just waste time, right? It's easy to do that, and people often are sucked into it. So you want to make that harder, whether that's putting your phone in airplane mode, charging on the other side of the room, or using an app blocker, or just being really strict with yourself, right? Making this disciplined environment will allow you to rely less on that willpower of, well, I really just want to check one thing, but you may know that that's going to lead probably to a spiral and more of a less of a cognitive break to restore energy, and more of something that's draining your time and energy. So part of your goal as you study it and kind of manipulate your environment is to decrease your own possibility of off-task behavior, right? So that's what I mean by make what's easy hard, right? Make it harder to access those things that distract you. And it's usually the phone, to be perfectly honest. But if you're on your computer, Some people are then going on the internet or just looking at the various things. So just figure out what your patterns are and try to engineer an environment that makes you more disciplined. So like, I know for me, it depends on the season, but it could be sports scores where I'll go to waste time, or I'll look at, certain like news sites. And before I know it, I spent a long time and it hasn't really helped my day or made me more productive or more happy. Right. So for me, I know that that's a thing. And so sometimes I'll just, like I said, put it on airplane mode or turn my phone off, or just know, I'm not going to go here for a while because I'll feel better and it'll be more productive if I just take the dog for a short walk, right? Or if I just read a little bit, right? Or just even just stretch my legs and rest my brain. That is a process. It's hard to learn how to inhibit these distractions. It's honestly one of the hardest things especially for high school age people, right? Because we just have these default things like mostly social media, but default tracks that we can go to so easily, and especially during final exam season as you prep, it's just so important to try to inhibit. That doesn't mean no fun. It's actually very important to work in breaks and playtime. That will help you though when you're working, you're just working. And then when you're eating breakfast, you're just eating breakfast. Or when you're watching a basketball game or playing basketball with friends or horseback riding or playing an instrument, that's just good quality, enjoyable playtime. We need those healthy boundaries so that you don't feel like you're just working constantly, but also that when you are working, it's productive and efficient, right? And then you can get the most out of your fun and playtime as well. And sometimes, like right now, this time of year, playtime is just actually sleep, right? I do think it's still important to work in exercise and something that you enjoy, whether that's video games or whatever. But it's okay and probably smart to cut down on that a lot right now until finals and APs are over. This we touched on, but if you know you're a gamer and you want to just get onto the video game, but it might take you 2 hours of your night, right? And then it's going to be hard to get back into anything else because that's what's fun and easy. Make it harder to access. Don't allow yourself to access it for a while. And then if you're looking at your organization and planning skills and thinking, well, I'm not very good at this, that's also just a realization that's important. You can work on your own or with a coach to make literally planning easier and better suited to you and your environment. And it's going to be different for everyone. What works for one student won't work for another. At most points, I would say most people at some point of life have been a procrastinator. I see a ton of this, even especially maybe with really bright students who just kind of wait till the last moment. And often it's hard to identify why we do that, right? Like the easy explanation is, well, it's more fun to just be online and play video games, and so I don't really do the work until I have to. And then a lot of students say I work better under stress like that, which is more of a justification than anything else. We should think about what is the conscious or unconscious resistance to planning and working ahead, right? So is it fear of failure? Is it overconfidence? Is it as simple as like I'm not motivated because I don't have a set goal? Could be any of those things or a combination. And then you got to plan. How are you going to counter that procrastination, right? When you feel it coming on, how are you going to work ahead and plan ahead? Sometimes rewards or self-consequencing can be important. So if I do this many hours of work, I'll allow myself 1 hour of video games. And I think generally a good rule of thumb is don't save the hardest thing for last. Do some of the hard things first, and then reward yourself, and then do some of the easier things, right? And just having those easier things left is a reward in and of itself. And then do make sure that you are willing and just don't hesitate to seek help. I think students and people in general are not great at this, but if there's office hours, attend them. Reach out to your teacher, right? Saying, here's my goal. Is there anything I can do to make sure I get there? Understand what's coming on the test. Study groups can be great. Tutoring can be helpful. Study guide, search the internet within reason, right? But I think like looking at the syllabus is something students don't do. And sometimes the test, like the format and what's on it is laid out just right on the initial syllabus. But I do think if you're concerned or if you're especially motivated to get a grade on a certain test or in a certain class, make sure the teacher knows that, right? So make your presence known and your effort known as well. Part of this is identifying who to ask and when. So you don't want to wait until, if the test is on Friday, you don't want to wait until Thursday to ask for help, right? If the teacher's last office hours that week are on Wednesday, that means that Tuesday and Wednesday are the days you need to be figuring things out, figuring out what you need, and then making sure you've prepared properly for office hours on Wednesday, not just for the test on Friday. So there's right ways and wrong ways, but I think in my experience and as a teacher, I always liked it when students asked for guidance or for help. If I couldn't help, I would say that, but generally I always tried to, right? Motivation and a student showing that they're motivated is always a good thing in my mind. I think most teachers agree. So let's talk a little bit about the hands-on scheduling of review. Block studying is not effective. Multiple short sessions with breaks is much more effective. We just want to interrupt without interfering. So you want to switch topics, you want to go kind of bang, 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 but you don't want to do it to your detriment. This is a hard thing to do. Most EF coaches are big fans of like the big old calendars you can put up on your wall and write everything on it. So I think that's more of an old school method. But for students who like to see it there visually, I think it's accountability and it helps plan and prioritize. So you print out your schedule or you have this big, wall calendar where you write where everything is. And then I would say in addition, or I guess alternatively, you can use an app. Google Calendar is what I use for everything. Right. So like I have notifications set to 10 minutes before it starts, but it's also like I just look at my calendar every day and I know what's coming up. Notice here that this person has scheduled an hour of work and then a 30-minute break, and then an hour of work and a 30-minute break. I think scheduling in that downtime is great. You may even want to schedule in, dinner with friend, right, for a couple hours. But it helps you track due dates and just really is crucial for prioritizing. I'm always shocked when I learn that most students don't use like an app calendar, right? So the phone is something we have with us pretty much all the time. And so being able to have our schedule sorted on a calendar, I mean, it's definitely the right move. And of course, there's iCal and there's other things, but Google Calendar is a really nice one. So I think this probably would be more of a college final exam schedule, but it could definitely be high school. Notice how this person has scheduled the exams in bold. So you might be able to color code that and just put all your finals in red, right? And then look also at Saturday, for example. 9 o'clock wake up looks like about 4 hours of work, which is a lot of work, but then 2 hours of lunch and relaxation, right? And then an evening afternoon session. And then you look at Monday, right? You've got exam followed by exam. So you better build in some time to relax, right? So from 1 to 2, this person is going to have lunch and just decompress, right? Then they're going to study for some math and they've got tutorial, right? Very long night. So Monday is going to be a rough day. That's why that person planned on Tuesday. Well, I know I'm going to be exhausted, so I'm not going to plan to review after that. I need to maybe sleep and then get some coffee and then start again. Right. So this will wind down as the week goes, just like we will. We'll be tired and just having more of these tests under our belt. Right. So build in free time, downtime, and schedule as much as possible. Right. I think that if you don't hold yourself accountable to the downtime, then it's easy to just keep working or go on the phone or not really have productive downtime. Little mnemonic device, which we didn't talk about much, but that's something that you can definitely use as you study. But GOAT, GOAT, the greatest study plan of all time. The G is something we've touched on a lot, which is goals. attainable goals, right? Not easily attainable, but challenging, but definitely goals that are achievable. So if you have like an 88, you don't want to think, oh, I need to get a 97, right? You want to just get into the A range. For every session, so for every study session or for every test, have one safe goal and one stretch goal, right? So, well, what I'd really love to do is I'd love to get through all my AP World History notes by Tuesday of next week. That's my stretch goal. But the safe goal is going to be I need to get it done by that Friday. And then it's hard not to get overwhelmed this time of year. So prioritize, be realistic, and be gentle with yourself. If you don't, finish everything on time or live up to your exact plan, just realize that happens to most of us. And then you just got to recalibrate and think, okay, that's all right. Let me just take it from here. The O in GOAT is for organization. The calendar can help a ton. It will help you just prioritize and focus. It helps you create a routine so that you know when it's time to focus. And this also goes to just a decluttered study area, right? So people work better with less clutter. Make sure you've got everything you need, right? A lot of times students are like, oh, I don't know where my calculator is. And it's just something you should always kind of have handy, right? Pour out your backpack and see what in there is not necessary. And then remembering to schedule study time, right? That helps us stay organized. The A is for attention, as in focus your attention on the work and the studying for the exams. If you, like most people know what distracts them, and again, it's usually the phone, remove it, right? Multitasking is not effective. Even listening to music, if it's music with lyrics, it's like 0.5% of people are able to do that. Do allow short breaks, but again, don't make it like a 20-minute break or a 30-minute break. That's probably too much. 5, 10, maximum 15 minutes, right? And try to keep it more structured. And then the T is for testing. This is active studying. So we're going to talk a little bit about passive versus active review. I think the most important part of studying for exams is testing yourself. So not just passively reviewing notes, but instead writing summaries of those chapters in your notes. Just writing it down does wonders. Testing can also involve teaching. So that could be like, again, a family member, a friend, a study partner, or even just like your pet or a picture. But reciting it, teaching it, writing it, that's how you really know that you've mastered the content. So as we talk about approaching test day and kind of final review strategies, notice that with the breaks and the shorter work periods, we're really doing this chunk chew check method. It's the best way to learn. If somebody stays on the same topic for an hour and a half, people will lose focus. So you have to switch it up, right? Every 10 minutes you learn something new, our brain needs a couple minutes to process. And then we need to check it. So let's say I would teach something about geometry, triangles and angles. We'll do 10 minutes or so learning a concept. Then we will review a practice question, and then we'll do a couple of new practice questions to test what we learned. And if it's going well, great, we can move on. And whatever it doesn't go well, we have to then come back, right, and chew on it a bit more. So smaller time blocks allows you to study smaller bits of info. You process it, we verify that we know it by testing, and then and only then move on. That's how you retain information really well. So we talked about this as well a little bit. Is it better to block study or distribute over time? Well, here's the results. What happened during the practice itself, so like when somebody was studying for exam A, which was 3 straight blocks of practice on Monday and Tuesday. During that practice, and right when those blocked A sessions ended, those people actually had an almost 90% accuracy. Whereas during the practice itself, the ones who mixed up the study, distributed A and then A and then A later, they didn't have as good of an accuracy. But then look at 1 week later. So this is about retention of information, A, because they broke it up and then interrupted it with different things, ended up retaining the information really, really well, whereas the blockers retained almost nothing. And we've all had this experience of just cramming for like a math test and then realizing, a couple months later, we've forgotten everything we learned. Part of that is because of the way we're studying. So mixing it up when you study, don't do all just one topic, and very long blocks. Distributing over time is proven to help you retain information better. This is just on that note. The longer we spend on a topic, the harder it is to retain all that info. When we switch topics, there's less interference. So if I'm studying for history and then I switch it to Spanish, it actually, the way it works in your brain is kind of similar to a nap, where it interferes a little bit. There's a beginning, there's an ending, and it will help you retain and remember that information. And remember that those breaks are best to be active outside if possible, right? You're trying to allow yourself to reset a bit, then you jump into something new before going back to what you've already learned. A bit counterintuitive, but definitely the right way to be studying for most people. If you are finding yourself passively studying, right? So I've got the notes, they're perfect. It's a good copy. Reading through those is just not going to help you retain the information that well. It's not useless, but there's no struggle. Same with reading a chapter and rereading it. There's not much value there. It's not that likely that that knowledge will stick in your memory. So instead, we should be doing stuff like making study guides, writing them down, creating concept maps and outlines, writing down the topics that you know are going to come up or that you're most worried about. Maybe if there's an essay or short answer part, right? Think about positions you could take and some potential evidence or pros and cons. If there's a textbook, maybe write answers to end of chapter questions. This is all more active than that passive reading notes or watching videos. And look for themes and patterns throughout. Just like you can color code events on Google Calendar and, like, for example, tests separate from assignments and so on, you might want to color code your notes. So in history, maybe it's purple for people, any sort of historical figures. Maybe it's red for events and green for just theories or like industrial revolution or concepts or whatever. And then for math, you could also do the same. Yellow formulas, blue terminology, so math vocab, and then red for proofs. Again, these are just suggestions that some people I think will really love, and others would be like, yeah, I'm not doing that, not going to help me. So think about what works for you and try it. As you are reviewing your notes for exams, you want to ask yourself questions and really try to respond to them. Like write out your answers whenever possible. So again, it could be any class, but think about things like, what is the concept or topic? Who are the main people involved? Right? All just these who, what, where, when, why. When did it happen and where? And really why and how are the big ones. Right? So like, what led to this and why do we care? Connecting and linking things in your mind, linking ideas, is key to memorizing them. If you have all these ideas in isolation, the memory won't stick. If we link them, you're much more likely to remember on test day. We said ask questions, consult the syllabus, know what's on the exam, right? We need to know exactly the material, but also the format. So is it all multiple choice? Can I get partial credit in math, or is it just right answer or bust? For written responses, if there are any, is there a set format or structure? So you don't want to go in and just not know exactly what the teacher wants, right? That's just part of the due diligence of studying and knowing what the test is. And again, don't be afraid to go to teachers. Some teachers are more approachable than others, but how can I best prepare for your tests? I mean, that's a fair question. I would have always liked that if the student asked me that. You may want to check with classmates that you know have done well in that class or on tests. What are you doing that's working? Right? That's a nice thing to ask and not embarrassing, and people I think will be happy to help for the most part. Or maybe if you're a sophomore or junior, you can ask seniors who've already taken that class. And just showing up and making it clear that you're motivated, that you care, I think is half the battle. But going to those office hours, study halls, review sessions, right? Just making that effort. Make sure you know exactly what's coming and that you're not taken by surprise on test day. Just a few other things to ask about or to know. So are we allowed to go from one section to another and back? Like on the SAT and ACT, you definitely can't do that. But not everyone knows that when you're done with section one, you cannot go back. You need to know for certain topics, how much information do I need to know? Is it a little bit about a lot, or do I just need to know a lot of info about a few things? It's always good to link ideas, but on a test, do we need to know those broader connections, or will they be tested in isolation? And again, how's it graded? What do I need to get? How important is this to my overall grade? Right, so really this planning ahead will help you prioritize. One recommended plan of attack is the 15 and 10 rule, which is as you're studying for finals or APs, instead of doing like 30-minute blocks, which is on the short side, you do like 50 minutes of studying and you use the rest of the hour to take a walk, to get a snack, to drink some water, to stretch your legs and roll your neck and shoulders, not to go online and sink your time into something that is a known distraction. So putting away all those technologies, right? No TV in the background, right? Having your cell phone charging elsewhere. Uh, Music with lyrics. I mean, there are people who are multitaskers, but a vast majority of us are monotaskers. So limiting distractions and just making sure that they are not available to you. But 15 minutes on, 10 off is it generally works for a lot of people. And then just as we approach test day, here's what we're going to do. So like one example for one class would be, first step is review your notes. It's a long semester or year. We've bound to have forgotten some stuff, and just seeing it again will unlock a lot. Second, if there's a study guide, review it. Highlight things that you know that you don't know, right? So like, oh, I'm going to need to figure out what this is, and then ask people, right? And do that early. Don't wait till the last moment. Third, review the text. So like that could be a textbook or a packet. You don't want to try to just read the whole thing again, because that's not time effective or really that helpful. I think pictures are important. So graphs, figures, maps, they can be helpful. Sometimes on test day, we won't remember the words in the chapter. We'll be like, okay, that was by this graph. And then maybe you'll make a connection. And then again, that initial review will show you topics you feel better and worse about. Focus on the ones you don't feel as strong with. Right? So this will work for just about any class as an initial review. And then if you feel like you're, oh man, I really know this well, we just did this, or like I just really understood this unit, move on. Make sure you're not focusing on extraneous stuff, right? It's got to be on the test, it's in the study guide, or it's in the actual class. Think about things the teacher has emphasized recently or a lot, right? So plan ahead if we know they might ask me to write about this, for example. And then finally, review your notes again. That's the first thing we did, but review your notes again, and then look for topics that you were like, well, I learned more, but I still need a little bit more on this, right? And that's when you cross-check and look back, but it's a more limited amount of things at that point. So it's all about just breaking it down, right? You're trying to make your life easier in the end. And I can't say this enough, as you study, write things down, right? If you have a question and then you go research it and you answer it, don't just leave it in your brain, write it down, right? I had trouble with this, but now I wrote it down and I can remember it next time. Again, study partners and groups can be great as long as they are not distractions. All right, last few slides and then open up for any questions you guys may have. On test day itself, so a lot of these are coming up, just make sure you got what you need. I would say pens, pencil, paper, calculator, but also snack, water, sweatshirt in case it's cold in there, right? As the summer approaches, sometimes the AC is blasting in certain parts of the country, right? And that can really affect us during the test. If it's an open note test or open book test, you better know that. If you could bring a calculator, make sure it's charged. Make sure it's in degree mode, not radians, if that's what you're supposed to be in. And then if it's a test on a device, you got to know what can you bring and what can't you bring, right? So usually it's just the device and the charger, and maybe you need to like install an app. That's how we do the SAT these days. But just prepare, make sure you know what you've got, and lay that out the night before the test. Most of my students laugh when I say, get good night's sleep and good rest before the test, because this time of year that is elusive. It is hard to get a good night's sleep because there's just so much going on. People aren't sleeping that much. But truly, the night's sleep, the couple days before the test, is crucial and maybe the biggest indicator of success on like standardized tests. If you eat breakfast, generally like a protein-filled breakfast, you should definitely do it. You should probably do it regardless. And again, I tell people like if the test is on Friday, Wednesday and Thursday night sleep are the most important. So making sure you're not going in starving, right? Or just with totally exhausted, right? That's not going to have a great result. And then some final tips for the next couple of weeks. Study sessions. Again, those can be individual or with groups, but if you have a really good group or partner, it can hold you guys accountable and make it more entertaining, honestly, less dull. As we plan ahead, know that it's not going to go perfectly the first time. So build checkpoints in where you kind of say, all right, let me check on how I'm doing right now. And if the plan isn't working, recalibrate, right? Okay, well, dang, I haven't gotten through as much of the history stuff as I need. I might need to push back Spanish so I can focus on this the next couple of days. But also be gentle. Again, it's not going to go perfectly. And sometimes you'd be like, well, I'm working so hard, but I'm not getting the results. So we can have this feedback cycle where it's like I'm studying, but it's not going well. So now it's like I don't want to study and it's harder, and then it works less well. So instead, if things aren't working, just acknowledge, hey, I'm trying to reinvent the way I process information and plan and study, right? If you struggle with that, and we know we do, it's not going to just click into place. Step one is thinking about the way you think, right? Metacognition. And then step two is really about putting a plan into place. But then that's not the last step. You have to recalibrate and readjust and make sure that you are finding your comfort zone. Appleruth offers academic tutoring, and then I mostly do test prep and some executive function coaching. The test prep is to prepare for 2 or 3 official SATs or ACTs usually. So those are like 90-minute or 1-hour sessions or 2-hour sessions. And then executive function, we usually do 30-minute sessions once a week. You want to try to kind of build that out so that you're meeting less often as the student gains more knowledge of their skills and a better structure generally. I'm going to open it up for questions. We've got plenty of time for that. If you feel like you've gotten what you need, you don't have questions, feel free to call it an evening, and I appreciate you joining. But yeah, I'm just going to open it up and see if there are any good questions that we want to address. Okay, so here's a good one. This question says, in competitions where you compete for multiple days, where like various but related subjects, any tips? So like, let's say, I don't know, it's like a quiz bowl or something, and you've got several days, but the first day is history, and the next day is US history specifically, and then the third day is like religion. So not completely unrelated things, but not directly related. I think this is where breaking things up and interrupting is important. In other words, the first day, like you want to make sure that, let's say the competition starts on Saturday and it starts with history, world history. Plan backwards is my recommendation. So in other words, I know that that first day is history. And so on Friday night, I want to be studying for history. And on Saturday night, I want to be studying for US history because that's what's coming up the next day. Right. And on Sunday night, I'll be studying for the religion stuff, and then work your way backwards. So then the prior week, you can build in like one history, one US history, one religion session, but just, I would say, don't block them off as like 1, 2, 3. Instead, do a little bit of each. And then as the competition approaches, you focus in on what's coming up directly the next day. But the short answer is work backwards. Always work backwards from test day or competition day, and that will help you plan ahead. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the session's being recorded, and I believe the plan is to send the link out. It usually happens like later in the week, but I do believe that there's going to be a link that will get sent out. A very good questions so far. Open to see if any others come in. If questions do come up, you can reach out to the email below here. If you're interested in AP prep, I don't do much of that, but we have a bunch of tutors who do. So even just like 1 or 2 sessions and pointing in the right direction for materials can help. And then I'm doing, so good question. So tutoring and executive functioning, I do all of that remotely. We offer both. So the question is executive functioning coaching, is it online or is it in person? The answer is both, but a lot of our coaches now just work kind of across the country. So like our company's based in Atlanta and a couple other cities. I live in Boulder, Colorado. So I do all of my stuff online. But these days with Zoom and screen sharing, I definitely think that the test prep is easier online. And I think vast majority of students do great with online EF coaching. That being said, there are some who really just need that hands-on in-person coach. And for those in the cities where we have major markets, we do have coaches. A couple more questions. One child, elementary school, has poor executive function, which I would also first reframe, but meaning like maybe there are certain skills that aren't as strong as a sibling, right? Or aren't as strong as we would like. The question though is how do we help tension not to build up during competition day? So again, this could be an academic or athletic competition. And sometimes it does like lower executive function skills do result in anxiety, right? Or just kind of uncertainty, lack of self-confidence. The first thing then would be if you're trying to avoid buildup of tension and anxiety, we have to get to the root of it. A lot of times it's fear of failure. And so then you think about, well, what are you afraid of? Who are you afraid of disappointing? What's the worst that can happen? And if it does happen, like, is it really that bad? That's where I would start. It also could just be, a lack of intrinsic motivation. What's your goal? Oh, I don't really care. Oh, well, maybe we need to take a break from swimming until you do care. So it's really about diagnosing first, and then you can kind of decide, oh, these are the skills that are lacking, and we want to work on those a little bit more. Yeah, so academic competition makes sense. And I will say that by definition, so this student, for example, is on the autism spectrum, the parent said, and has ADHD. Students who have learning differences are by definition going to have lower executive function skills in certain regards. And so I think executive function coaching is really good for a lot of those students, just because you get that one-on-one, someone who has worked with students who have ADHD or on the spectrum, who have dyslexia, who have processing issues. I think someone who really can work one-on-one with that student can help a lot, because it's mostly about diagnosis. It's what are the main strengths and deficits, and then get into the why, right, and what might work for us. So some trial and error will definitely happen there. One more question is, for executive function, is it better to start when school starts, so they set up their binders or calendars and so on, or should we do executive function coaching over the summer? Both are fine options. I would probably start a little bit over the summer, just because there's less going on, and often students are more open to it, and you try to get buy-in, pretty early. Most students buy in after the first couple minutes. I think you can really start at any time, and it depends on what you need. But I think it's great to start in like a June or July, so that you can plan ahead for the school year. I really like that idea. But some students start when they're like in elementary school. Others need it as a freshman in high school. Some need it as, you know, freshmen or sophomores in college. So it depends on where we're at and what we need. Yeah, and you can really start anytime. Usually it's like a very short session, so it's not a huge commitment. And some students only need one or two, and then they're like, oh yeah, I get this. It clicks in, and they're able to kind of self-correct and be, I guess, more be intrinsically motivated. And some students really need that continued guidance. Cool. Really good questions. I appreciate you guys joining and hope it was informative. Have a great rest of your evening and good luck on those tests coming up. Thanks all.